Good evening, and welcome to the third session of White Feather's Counsel of Men. My name is Warren Hammonds, and the co host with me is
I'm Phillip White.
Bill White.
White.
We are happy to be here again, and this effort is to try to engage audiences of a white population and a population of color into the dialogue and the engagement of racial reconciliation. We'd like to start this session with a quote from Marian Anderson that is 65 years old. In 1956, Marian Anderson wrote, "There are many persons ready to do what is right because in their hearts they know it is right. But they hesitate, waiting for the other fella to make the first move, and he in turn waits for you. The minute a person whose word means a great deal dares to take the open hearted and courageous way, many others follow."
And that is where we want to start with having some discussion in regard to how Juan and I want to address this session tonight, speaking in reference from our own perspective. How what would I say to white men? What would I say to black men? So each of us going to take that question and from our own personal perspective, let's just share with you from our collective life experiences to answer those questions. Because what we want to do is kind of set a format that can bring us together, men as a whole, in regard to our place in America and what goodness we can have and what we can do and how we need to take ownership and accountability for the things that we are not doing so well in and just have an open dialogue and go from there. So that's our platform tonight. So we hope that you will come with an open mind and be able to think about your own space, your own safe place, your own vulnerable place,
Mhm.
in reference to how you yourself will tackle that particular question when you have the opportunity or you seek the opportunity, or like Marian Anderson said, when you find the courage to approach someone that's not within your social group to engage in this type of conversation. So that's how we want to get things started tonight, and we look forward for you having your participation by communicating with us as we open this box. So let's get started.
So I'm going to start us off, and I'm addressing the question of what I would like to say to white men. There are a few things that I think are important. One of those, and the first, is I want to say that the past does matter. Yes, even as far back as slavery. It doesn't mean that has to drive the ship the entire way, but because there is so much unresolved grief and anguish and trauma associated with history, um, there is some intensity and there is wounds and pains left. There are systems in our culture in which we still live that need to recognize that it's tied to history. So the past does matter. The past has left others exploited, discriminated against, victims of violence. So considering the past helps us maybe put things into a little more perspective, gives us a grander view, and it helps us understand ideas such as what generational trauma might be and the woundedness that is perpetuated. Because we all know that a left open wound is a pretty bad thing.
Yeah.
It gets worse, there's more damage. Dealing with the past makes me wonder about things such as what restorative justice does and is and can be, how to deal with that world that still carries the grief and the burdens and the oppression that relate to history. So the question I'm left with is, can the harm be repaired? So the past does matter. However, we can't get stuck just there. And so we need to face the realities of now as white men. We can't give into the notion that We can't give into the notion that all is well and that we've arrived just because we've had a black president or that the civil rights movement was 50, 60 years ago. We can't give into the thought either that as whites, we may have worked very hard all our lives for where we are. We can't give in to the thought that even though that might be the case, that we are exempt from what is happening now and any forms of oppression and discrimination that might still be within our systems, be within our culture, be within the institutions that we live in each day. We just can't continue to make the same mistake of thinking that all people have been given equal opportunities or that all people are given equal opportunities right now. It's just not the case. Resources and opportunities are not equal. The playing field is not equal. And we must come to grips with that. So I ask what distributive justice has to do with this, and it does need a lot of work in our society. There is still work to be done, and we must admit that. We are not here, let me say this, to make people feel guilty, especially the white folks out here that are listening. We don't want to send you on a guilt trip, although maybe we should, but we don't want to do that. Defensiveness might defeat the purpose of why we're here because we would bottle up. We would not be who we really ought to be when we come to these conversations. We do want these dialogues to be challenging, and they will be intense. But we don't want you to come feeling like we are already laying a guilt trip on you. But we do need to come prepared to deal with roles that we may play now or have played in the past about the continuance of power and control in our society and the systems and institutions which have been created that still leave people disenfranchised and leaving so many people fearful, hurt, and powerless. And then the last thing I might say to the white listeners out there is that you are encouraged to come. You're encouraged to come open and vulnerable, recognizing that there are hurts that still exist and that there are consequences that a white dominated society has created. It may help you to deal with or read about things and phrases such as restorative justice or systemic racism or white privilege. Asking ourselves what power and privilege what do those things have to do with where we are today? And maybe even reading something new that would challenge you. I'm going to share just two books with you real quick that might guide you and help you. One is The Little Book of Racial Healing by Thomas Norman DeWolf and Jody Geddes. A great read and a small read, but quite informative and quite challenging. A larger work, very in depth, about the fourth revised edition of Paul Kivel's Uprooting Racism: How White People Can Work for Racial Justice. A great read, very challenging, very insightful. So I would encourage you to be challenged by conversations that are coming about, but come with openness and come with some vulnerability. So that's what I'd like to say to the white listeners.
Thank you. That was good. That was good. My goal. I have a little book here that I've had for a while that basically is the whole development of the U.S. Constitution, and I'm speaking now to my. We use the term to simplify. We say white and black, but in a sense of whoever created those terms does not really identify us, because basically we all our DNA is the same. It's this pigmentation of my skin and your pigmentation really shouldn't be a separation. but somehow that has been used to create separations rather than looking at our commonalities that we have. So when we so to my to my European Anglo-Saxon brothers, when this Constitution of the United States were created, your forefathers, they were in the room. They helped create this Constitution. When the discussion came around to my forefathers, they finally compromised and decided that we were uh, 3/5 of a person. We could not even be equal as a complete human during the time of the creation of the Constitution of the United States. Now, the only compromise in that debate during that time with those who created the Constitution was to come up with the amendment we call the 13th Amendment that basically supported slave like conditions if you were incarcerated or committed some type of crime. Now, we all know that when we talk about crime and incarceration, the people that occupied those facilities all across this country probably with a high probability rate that those are folks that look like me. Okay. And is that a coincidence, or is that part of what we call that systematic system of racism? Is that systematic system of how this so-called justice system, is it really justice, or is it just a way of promoting that sense of power and control? So what I would say to my white brothers here is this in regard to what you can do. It's not much you can do about the past. It's not much you can do when we think about the future. But in reference to the future, that is a prolong to what you can do right now. That is within your control in regard to how you can take, as Marian Adams said, you can be the brother that has the courage to take that step forward, to do the right thing, to when you see wrong, you say it's wrong. You see, and not being captured by this fear monger that we seem to keep brothers, particularly my white brothers, to keep you silent. Even though you know what you just witnessed, what you just heard, what you just read is absolutely wrong, but you won't say anything. You won't say one single word. That's being complicit. You see. So when somebody when you get offended when somebody may say, well, you support certain people that have these extreme philosophies in regard to that seems to support racist attitudes and behaviors, and you get offended by that because you don't consider yourself to be a racist. But here's the catch there. If you're not speaking against it, then you can easily be tagged, not saying it's right or wrong, as supporting it because you won't take a position. And everybody has an opinion. So that's one of the goals that I hope you can be able to embrace for your own sense of having a sense of being complete. That if you know something that doesn't feel right in your soul, that you will have the courage to just speak your own truth. Speak your own truth. To have the courage to meet someone that looks like me and be able to engage in a conversation, to develop a friendship, to learn that person's walk in life, and he can learn your walk in life. And guess what? You may find out that you have a lot in common. But we got to start somewhere, and that is one of the promises, the opportunities that what we're doing here is to allow us black men, white men, to be able to speak our truths. So that would be my message to my white brothers, is that this is an opportunity for us, all geared towards us coming together, addressing healing, building good, trusting relationships, so that we can begin as a collective group. We're always going to have those that are on the outside making a lot of noise, creating a lot of problems. We always have, always will. But that does not need to be you. You can let them go and do whatever they have to do. We are basically talking about is what John Michel, the presidential historian, that always talking about the good angels among us. And it is those good angels that help keep a country like this stable. It's not the people that's making a lot of noise. It's those people that go about doing what they have to do to take care of their families, just being decent people. And I personally believe that there are more white males in this country that fits that description of what I just said. That are just decent, good, hardworking people want to take care of their families and just want to live a life free of a bunch of foolishness. And those are the individuals that I would love to meet because I think together we can make the kind of impact that we all need for this country. Because if we ever going to get to that point where we can strive towards that perfect union, it's going to take all of us. It's going to take all of us. And so, so take this opportunity to do some soul searching and figure out how you can begin to engage. Start with your friends. Because I guarantee you there are others that feel the same way you do. You're just not talking about it. So I'll give you that invitation to do that now. And then we can begin to build that kind of union that we need to push this country forward.
That's great. And before we flip the table and talk to our black listeners, our black brothers out there, or those of color listening, I'm so glad that you offered some suggestions of how the white man can be engaged.
Right.
Because, I have a feeling that those that are listening here, we're not guilty of overt racism.
Right.
We don't discriminate daily. We don't harm. We're not the ones that are out there creating the violence. But we are the ones that are still a part of this system of power and privilege. And that's where we have to engage. So why don't you take the next and let us speak?
Sure.
Let us speak to the others.
Let's speak to to my brothers.
Yes, sir.
These men of color, men of so much history. My dear brothers, there's so much to be said. The same that we said about when we were speaking about the white man. This Constitution, when this sacred document that we follow even to this day, from 1798 is when it was put together, but we still prescribe to its laws and principles. We were not in the room. We were nowhere near the room. Our forefathers were nowhere near the room. And there's been so much that has happened to us. If we just speak about us as a single unit of men of color, since our forefathers first stepped foot in this land called America, and all the challenges and struggles that we had to endure just to be able to try to keep our families safe and keep ourselves safe. And we have been victims of so much in this country, so much. Professor Cornel West, he refers to it as unregulated brutality. But one of the wonderful things about us as a people, and men, I want you to embrace this, is that regardless of all of the systematic systems that were put in place to try to keep privileges from us, to keep us oppressed, to keep us mentally enslaved, we've always found a way to rise up. We've always found a way to overcome. And that is just as much part of our history as it is our future. And one of the things that I want our brothers to embrace, and to share this with your male children, your male relatives, all the children that you be around, if you're a teacher, is that we cannot function as a group if we have self-hate. You can't hate me and I can't hate you, because sometimes that's kind of taking on the personality of those that have oppressed us for years. And self-hate is never going to benefit us at all. So we have to embrace our history. We have to embrace the richness of who we are, and to be able to build that brotherhood. Iron sharpens iron. um, Dr. John Kinney. He's a uh, dean at the School of Theology at Virginia Union University here in Richmond. And I once saw him, he was talking about men and what he describes as this competition that men seem to have all the time between themselves. And he used this illustration like this. He said, this is men all throughout this country. Let's say black men, white men, but men, we're always like this. We're always like, who's on top, who's on bottom. Top. He said, that's what keeps us separated. He said, well, we really need to be like this. We need to be together. If we come together, we can do all kinds of wonderful things if we can come together. So it's not a question of if, it's a matter of when. So I'm excited. I am very excited to be part of the witness how we can begin to come together in a very brotherly way, in a very sincere way, in a very spiritual way, where future generations of children not yet born will benefit from what we're about to do here. So I encourage you, again, we open up saying, don't pay attention to those out there making a bunch of noise. You're always going to have those. We always have, always will. But be sincere to yourself. Be the kind of man that lives up to your possibilities and your creativities and all of the plans that your forefathers put before you, your parents. All of us have plans. All of us have gifts. Each of us have a spiritual gift. Put that to use. Michael Jackson once said that for you to have a gift and not use it, that is a crime. So find out what your gifts are, put it to work, and see yourself developing the kind of person that you know you can be. And let's go to work. Let's go to work. Let's take this and stop being in isolated cells, not sharing how you feel. And this last thing I want to say to you brothers as well as to my white brothers is this. Let's just call this a public service announcement. We got to take care of ourselves. You know, you really got to take care of yourselves, men as a whole. You got to get your PSAs. You got to go to your doctor. You got to drink water. You got to exercise. You got to take care of yourself. You really got to take care of yourselves. And if you need therapy, get therapy. It's okay. It's okay not to be okay. You know, let's get out of that. There's a lot of attention there that's focused on mental health. And we as men, we can't always be strong. We're not going to be tough. We can't always be tough. Sometimes life will break us down. And we have got to be in a position to say, you're okay. You can't always be strong. And when you need help, find somebody to help you. So let's get out of it. You know, we started talking about this some time ago, talking about that man box. And many of us have been imprisoned by this man box. And brothers, we want you to find the ability to get out. So let's go to work. Let's go to work.
Wow, thank you for that challenge. And maybe before I address my brothers of color, I want to hit on one word you mentioned. I don't think hate brings us here, but you mentioned it, and I think there is hate in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Listen to what Martin Luther King Jr. said about hate.
Right.
Hate is just as injurious to the hater as it is to the hated. Like an unchecked cancer, hate corrodes the personality and eats away its vital unity. Hate is too great a burden to bear. So I know we're not bringing that into this room, but you mentioned it, and I do think we ought to acknowledge that hate exists. Hate crimes, the violence that we're seeing is perpetuated, is caused by a lot of hate. And it's harmful to not just the one that's harmed directly by that hate, but it's harmful to the one that is instilling that hate.
You know, and I have this this other theory about hate. That sometimes I feel that people who practice hate really has this personal low self-esteem. They just feel so bad about themselves that the only way they can have some moment of pleasure about themselves is to feel like they, again, like Dr. Kinney said, that they better than somebody else. You know, so I'm going to work hard to become a millionaire, or I'm going to live in this big house and drive this big car to make myself feel better. When it really doesn't work. Now, how many people of wealth? My favorite subject is Howard Hughes. How many people of wealth were just miserable people? just miserable. Had all the money in the world. And the rest of us always chasing, if I had this, if I had that, somehow my life would be satisfied. Your life can be satisfied with not much, you know? And that's not a good roadmap to follow. That somehow if I'm wealthy, then boom, life is gonna be fine. No. We've had many of people that have chosen that path and they ended up committing suicide and all kinds of stuff. So hate has never been able to. It can last for a moment, throughout history. Hate has always seemed like it's got control, and people are afraid to come out in public and do all kinds of things. But somehow you always find a courageous few that would face it. Sometimes it may cost them their lives, but it brings us back to a stable point. Like John Meacham talking about those good angels. You see, so hate is part of every culture, probably around the world, particularly in America. But it doesn't get that kind of control that I think it wants to have, because there's far too many decent people to say no, we're not. That's not us.
And I now have the pleasure of trying to address our brothers of color listening. I will say this is harder for me, but maybe even more critical. So what I'd like to say are several things. I'll start with the fact that I think I come confessional. I'm sorry. I'm regretful for anything I've done or not done in keeping systems of oppression and discrimination and prejudice in place. But in all honesty, I'm not sure what all that might mean or be about. And so I think I need you to help me better understand that, to engage me more in that discussion, to tell me what that is more about. I do want to say that these conversations are not just for white folks coming to grips with the wrongs that we've caused. It's not just about us asking for forgiveness or simply telling you we promise to do better in the future. But we need you, and I need you, your voices, to help lead us, to help challenge us, and to help us understand more of what that dialogue ought to be about and how it ought to sound. In thinking of what to say to you tonight, I was reminded of another quote. This is over 40 years old, 1977. John Howard Griffin said this: "The only way I could hope to understand anything about the plight of black people would be to wake up some morning in a black man's skin." Well, that's the epitome of being empathetic. Some days I wish I could wake up in that skin, but I can't. And since I cannot, I need you, and we need you, to tell us more of what that is like, to explain to us, to help us understand, so that we can come with as much empathy and as much healing power as we might can. Maybe the hardest thing I might say to those listeners, my brothers of color out there, probably the hardest thing is to ask you to trust. Trust the conversations. Trust our intent here in these conversations to do what is right and to move the needle a bit. Trust our outstretched arms of reconciliation. They are here. I'm asking you to trust even in the midst of confusion and doubt and fear and anxiety that you might bring to the table. Because I would guess that because of your experiences, you haven't really learned to trust. maybe in small pockets, but as a whole. And maybe you were even taught that you cannot trust such intense dialogues or discussions or being vulnerable. So I realize that that's a hard task. I realize that it can be difficult because of the history and because of what is still happening in today's world. I know it might be a risk to trust, but that's what we need. So with those few things, that's what I'm offering to those listeners, to create a sense of not just a conversation, but of a healing conversation. Thanks.
Thanks, Lord. That's a great starting point. I had a flashback to one of my favorite movies, Denzel Washington, when he played Malcolm X. And there's a scene in that movie where Denzel has been invited to a university to speak. I say Denzel, but playing the role of Malcolm, who had been invited to speak at a university. And this student, white female, she runs up to him and she says, Mr. X, I just read everything that you have out here, and I really like your positions. What can I do to help? And Malcolm looks at her and says, nothing. And then they walk away. And I just want to encourage any white person that may have that same courage as that young lady to approach someone of my color who's out there beating the peace drum, trying to get things done that feel is right for all of us. And you may have some hesitation to approach that person, but please do. Because even when Malcolm said nothing to that young lady, I went into my childlike mind and said, I don't think she just stopped because he said nothing. Because she had been touched in a way that she felt that what he was saying meant something to her. So even though one person may say nothing to you, if you feel something is right in your soul, it's meant for you to keep on doing what you feel is right, to bring a sense of peace and justice to the greater group of people, you see. And we all can make a difference. Sometimes we don't need to be in a big crowd to make an impact. We can just start with our own engagement with one person, and another person may come, and another person may come. And sometimes you're given a task that's not necessarily created by you. It may have been created by the Holy Spirit, but was placed in you to do what needs to be done. And sometimes that's scary when you get a gift that you know you can't keep it to yourself. It's not shut up in your bones. you have to go out and use it or speak it or do something that is going to be greater than you. And I think there are a lot of people out in our culture that are like that got a lot of good things to say and do. And then just going back to what Mary and Andrew said, we just have to have the courage. You just have to put yourself in a circle of people that's going to encourage you to do or say. It's just like what we're doing here. Neither one of us, 6 months ago, had no idea we'd be in this space. We had no idea. And but here we are. And each time we come together, we talk a lot together before we come on this show about what we want to do. We hope it's going to be an impact. And we're just learning a lot about each other, and we're growing together. And I would have never in my life thought I would be in this situation with this gentleman talking about the subjects we're talking about. But that was not for us. Let me make it personal. It was not for Phillip White to make that decision, because the reason I'm here was something bigger and greater than me. And if all of us is just men, just look at yourself as a man. It's not about your race. It's not about the color or the thickness of your hair. It's not about your skin pigmentation. Just look at yourself as a man. And if we can find that is our common ground, man. That we are all men. We all basically are striving for the same thing. And that is to find some peace in our lives. That is to find some purpose in our lives. That is to find some sense of what can I do to contribute to the greater needs of my community, to my city, to my state, to my country. That's on us. You know, men like to call themselves the gatekeepers. Let's be the gatekeepers of this country coming together. And what better group than to lead that than us, men? You call yourself the head. You want to be the head of your household. You want to be the head of your company. Let's use that for the betterment of this country as a group. If we can step into that lane, and don't look around thinking everybody's going to follow you, because they're not. But that's for you to step in. That's the assignment that was given you. You can't turn away from it because it's been placed on you. Even though you may want to run away, you'll go to sleep thinking about it because that's the gift that's been placed in you.
Well, I'm like you of something you said just a moment ago, and that there's a lot of goodness in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think there's a lot of goodness out there. I think these listeners that will be engaged in this conversation have a lot of goodness. And I want to believe that. And I'd like to say a little bit about the conversation that we'd like to have, because I really think conversation is at the heart of healing. And what we hope to do during these sessions is not necessarily just about freeing and healing Black lives.
Yeah.
It's about healing all lives.
Right.
Because the truth of the matter is, I might need to be liberated from my own whiteness as deeply as you need to be liberated from a life of what it's been like to live as Black in America. So we both need liberating. We both need healing. And that's what these conversations are hoping to be about, hoping to engage, and hoping to evolve into.
And I would hope that people that tune into this show you'll find that common thread. And, you know, you have to ask yourself, when you somebody tells you about the Counsel of Men, you may see a show and you find yourself coming back to another show, and you have to ask yourself, what is it about this show that I keep wanting to know what they're going to say next? It is because what we are saying you can relate to. It is because it is something that's been buried deep in your soul that is starting to kind of shake you up a little bit. And you're finding that common type of connection to what Warren and I are saying. That is that connection. And the more connections we can make across this country, then we build in a kind of unity that cannot be disrupted, because it's us developing ourselves. We having that transparency and having that connection that's going to make us feel somewhat courageous. I keep coming back to that word, rather than remaining, kind of shut behind the door, in the closet. We got all these great ideas. We want to speak about things, but you don't want to upset certain people. But sometimes you got to rattle the cage to get things moving, you know. And I think one of the greatest pieces of advice that Warren and I received was from our executive director of this podcast, Patricia Jones Turner, Pastor Patricia Jones Turner. But she had sent us an email basically stating that she was excited about this venture that we were about to enter with this podcast, this Counsel of Men, that you guys would be entering uncharted waters. And I thought about that here we are together, addressing this particular subject of how men, white men, Black men, can come together to help create this movement towards this perfect union. We would never, ever, as a country, get on that road towards a perfect union if men are not included. So we'll never do it. We won't. It just won't happen. So if that's your desire to see America move towards a perfect union, then you have to get connected to what we're talking about. And if more of us prescribe to that goal, then I think we can do it.
Yeah. And I would like to say that connected does not necessarily mean you agree with everything
Right.
we say.
No, that's
For
right.
one, we're not the experts on what we're saying.
Mhm.
We're just here to create the conversation,
Right.
to create some dialogue.
Mhm.
So we're not asking for total agreement. We do hope that some of the things that we offer will be relevant, will resonate with them, will shake them up a bit,
Mhm.
will give some, allow you to think about some things that you may not have thought about up to now. So we hope to do some of that, but it's not necessarily for you to agree with everything that we bring here, but to connect with it somehow
Mhm.
and to have a conversation. And this is why we've done this tonight. We hope that this conversation of me addressing my white brothers and me addressing my black brothers and you addressing your black brothers and your white brothers is one good example of how the listeners and how others can do that in their own circles.
Sure.
What do you want to say to your race? What do you want to say to other persons of another color? How would you engage them? How would you have those conversations? And what do you want them to learn? And what do you want to explore with them? So I think that's where we're.
That's what it is. And I would say this, guys, that don't let fear prevent you from asking yourself this question. Don't you want to have some peace in your life? If you have the audacity to ask yourself that question, wouldn't I like to have some peace in my life, some sincere peace in my life, have a safe place to exist? If you have the courage to ask yourself that question, then have the courage to stand still and get the answer. Okay? If you do that, I guarantee it's going to come, and probably is going to come through sources that you never thought it would come from. But you're going to be open to receive it when it does hit you. Okay? So, all of us, we all have one of that wish list as men that we would like to see come to life during the course of our lifetime. And if you're not participating in that wish list, then you wasted your life. So if you have wishes that you would like to see to happen in America, then you have to take the steps to put it out there. And once you put it out there, you're gonna be amazed as to other people were thinking the same way you were. You see, now you're connected. It keeps building and building and building from there. So this relationship, this is part of that building. This is how we came together. Two total strangers just a few months ago. Total strangers have come together and been able to share and learn from each other's journey up to this stage in our lives. And I love his story. He's got some great stories, and I tell him stories, and we share books and we talk stuff. So this is real. This is no acting. This is real, and we are growing and learning together. And that's what I would challenge each of you to do: is find you a guy that looks like me. You develop a relationship with him, white brother. My brothers, you find a guy that looks like him and develop that relationship and have sincere, open conversation. You're not talking about sports. You're not talking about cars or rodeos and all that stuff. You're talking about life, real life stuff. You know, if we can start having those conversations, the same way you have conversations about a football team or basketball team and all that stuff, which is just entertainment. That's all it is. It's entertainment. But this stuff here, this is real talk. This is real talk. We're talking about us as life and having a life that has meaning and purpose. So if we can do that and imitate what we're trying to do here, and guess what? Final thing. We don't have all the answers. We do not have all the answers. But that answer is out there with some brother that's going to call in or send us an email that may have an answer that what we're trying to unpack here. But the answer is resting with one of you guys out there. You see? And we know that. That's why we want to create this avenue where we can talk to each other. You can send us emails or call in, and we just build this mountain of information that's going to be beneficial to us all.
So we're inviting you
That's
to the
right.
conversation. And I will want to say the email address that you can begin to use is WF Counsel of Men, and counsel is with an E.
Mhm.
WF Counsel of Men at gmail.com.